For a long time, I struggled with wanting to come back to YouTube and just being too scared and too averted. I felt like I'd lost my confidence. I didn't have the energy to really mask autism anymore. And I had inflammation in my brain that made it more difficult for me to find words. That made my being autistic more obvious, and I felt like it would make me more of a target. The system, they broke me. They broke me down. Was the system trauma aware when dealing with me? No, they were not trauma aware at all. And I'm back here to talk about systemic violence, structural violence. I want awareness for what happened to me because it has happened and is still happening to so many other people, particularly women, but guys too, of course, and especially people who are different, people who are neurodivergent. People who are on the spectrum tend to have more health problems and chronic illness and stuff, and that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that autism is a disease. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that there are some genetic connections, and it's not a separate thing like me saying that I'm autistic for attention because I want to be a special snowflake. That, first of all, I couldn't even fake autism if I tried. I'm awkward. I'm idiosyncratic. That's how I am. That's me. And it takes me a lot of energy to try to not be like that. So I definitely am on the spectrum, no doubt. So it's not like I wanted to be a special snowflake and then add on that I'm sick and all this. That's how they were seeing it at the time. And that's not what it was at all. It was that I have both. There are connections because there are a lot of females, especially females on the spectrum, who are experiencing symptoms of Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. And there are a lot of autistic people who have this like soft, skin and look younger. So they have some traits of connective tissue. So there is a connection. I made a video about that long ago, which is still on here. So it's not like people just inventing different things to be special about. That's a very ignorant and ableist way to look at it. It's more like people the way that I experience symptoms, even though it's awful and scary, it's also strange. And when I first started getting sick, I couldn't compare myself to typical illness, and I really struggled to communicate what I was experiencing. And that's one of the reasons why doctors ignorantly pathologized me. A lot of doctors don't like rare disease. They're practically xenophobic to people experiencing rare disease. They're taught that in medical school. There's that saying, when you hear hoofbeats, don't expect it to be a zebra. But what if it is? A zebra meaning rare disease. So they're taught to not recognize rare disease. So the problem with these doctors is that, they have this xenophobic attitude towards people with rare and unusual diseases and gaslight them. It's abusive. You say, oh, there's nothing, it's not a big deal. And the patients, question their sanity. And it's very common medical gaslighting rather than investigation and diagnosis like there should be. They blame psychiatric conditions. They misdiagnose people that are ill with, anxiety, depression, neuroses, even personality disorders, histrionic and borderline and stuff like that. in my case, the worst of all, factitious disorder. And I just want to take a moment when I open up about that to emphasize how wrong that diagnosis has now been proven to be for me. I have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. I've got the elastic skin. I've got the hypermobile joints. There is no way in hell that I could fake that. This is genetic. So factitious disorder means that you do things to yourself to fake symptoms. So when Dr. Sims diagnosed me with that, and yes, I'll say her name because that's what she did. When she diagnosed me with that, she didn't think about, you know, how wrong doing that could be. In fact, I could have easily sued her, but I'm not able to because there's a 2-year time limit to doing a personal injury like a medical malpractice lawsuit. Unfortunately, I missed that time limit. But I was told by a lawyer, 2 lawyers in fact, that I had a strong case to sue her because there was already, a diagnosis from a dermatologist who, said that my skin was of the Ehlers-Danlos type. And I already had an autism diagnosis, which had been also proven and recognized by a government support program, outreach program. So she tried to overstep evidence, but unfortunately, the system went way over the line to try and hurt me. It was a battle, like a David and Goliath battle for me to fight that and to, in the end win, even though I am damaged. I have won. I proved it repeatedly. I proved what was going on with me by, proper tests and medical imaging that I sometimes had to leave the country for because I wanted to win so that I could speak out about this abuse that happens to people because it's happening all the time. And what I want to say too is that when these doctors behave this way, they set a really bad example for society and they perpetuate ableism toward people who have rare and or unusual and or chronic illnesses. The dynamic of having a chronic illness is different than just having an acute illness and, being fine and then getting really sick for a few weeks and then getting better or getting injured. Society is more receptive to that form of illness, but chronic illness, they're very ignorant about. They don't understand the true dynamic of how people with chronic illness live, and they don't understand how someone could be well one day and in a wheelchair the next day, and they pathologize that and put it down. And in a way, it could be because they're afraid and they think, gee, I could never do that. Well, you know what? You do it when you have no choice. And we have no choice as people who are chronically ill. And, what you should be doing is commending and applauding people who have to do that out of respect, for goodness sakes, not putting them down. That is extremely ableist, ignorant, rude, and cowardly, really, to be putting people down. Now, there are people out there who do truly fake it. But they're few and far between. Most people who are presenting with canes and wheelchairs and saying they're too tired for this, they can't do that, they should be accommodated, commended, respected, understood, and accommodated, not pitied. I'm not talking about pity. I received the ultimate blow when I was diagnosed with factitious disorder by this woman. This particular woman, she's not your typical psychiatrist. She is known for being over the top. There are reviews that are terrible of things that she's done. She's very mean spirited and used rather, I don't know if she's still doing that because apparently she went on leave, used her psychiatry degree as a weapon. But for a long time, she was operating by a ruse of being this wonderful person and then behind the scenes attacking patients. And I, unfortunately, was one of those patients. And so once the door shut, it was like an interrogation. And I describe that in my book. But anyway, the ripple effect of it was that this is what the medical people see in my file, and they think that she's done some sort of investigation to prove this, and they take it seriously, and they treat me in a skeptical way all the time. And they did this to me for years. Every time that I was sick with anything, it was terrifying because they treated me with disdain and skepticism and reluctance to help me, until I got so sick that it was obvious that I couldn't be doing this to myself and that I really needed help. It took repeated sicknesses, and in that time, I probably developed the unstable discs in my neck that I'm dealing with today, because for a long time I was suffering with malnutrition that was not treated and flare-ups that were not treated. I now take mast cell medications, which are like help with my mast cell flare-ups. I have mast cell, it's like an immunological problem. So I take that medication, and I take digestive enzymes that pancreas enzymes. These are things I have to take that I needed the whole time, but I was without them for several years. I think about 3 years. And I believe that that's what did the damage, because I already had a bad neck, and it was already like straight and had a bit of a subluxation in it, according to a chiropractor that I'd seen. He said, your neck is not in good shape, but it wasn't unstable at that point. It was unstable 3 years later after all that abusive, neglectful treatment by the system. So I think there's a connection there. And it's funny because it kind of symbolizes a witch hunt. It reminds me of the medieval times when they'd hang somebody, but it's like I was hung and then somebody went, oh wait, but she's not a witch, she's telling the truth, and then cut me down halfway through. It feels like symbolic, and I guess the artist in me thinks about this dramatic symbolism, so don't mind me with that. But the point is I went through this and I survived it, and I don't want to just keep silent about it. I want to talk about it, and I want to write down my story and have my book be available to read for anyone. I want to talk about, this form of ableism when it comes to invisible illness, chronic illness, rare disease, and medical gaslighting, medical neglect. Again, these professionals set really poor examples for society, and rather than society just sort of blindly listening to this and following suit, I think what society should be doing is supporting us. Medical systems often don't serve chronically ill people very well. And my condition especially, it's practically an orphan disease, which means that there's almost no treatments specific to my condition that have been available in my country. We've had to be inventive when it comes to treating me. There are no best care practices for us. There's no care protocol for my condition. And people are suffering because of that. People with my condition are suffering badly. We don't have an available neurosurgeon. And the ILC Foundation is fighting to get one. So far, the government's been really stubborn about it, but they're going to keep fighting. And they're doing what they need to do to push for that. And I have hope that eventually they will win. But right now, we don't have anyone, and we have many specialists refusing to see us. GI doctors, we have severe GI symptoms, but the GI doctors refuse to see us oftentimes. They see Ehlers-Danlos on someone's file and they turn somebody away. I mean, that's discrimination. Doctors have far too much power. Doctors should be more regulated. When a patient comes to a doctor with a genuine need and a concern, they shouldn't even be allowed to turn them away like that. It's not right. So Society needs to start standing up for these wrongs that are happening in the medical system and in the helping systems and the structural violence. Society needs to be aware that psychiatrists are often being used as weapons against people with chronic illness. Yes, when you're chronically ill, it's hard. So, do we suffer from anxiety and depression from it? Of course. But the anxiety and depression are not causing our illness. It's the opposite. This faker thing needs to get sorted out here. Yeah, we're faking. We're faking being well, okay? We're not faking being sick. So you see a relatively well person, one day being okay, looking good, doing some stuff, seeming fine to you. And then the next day they're using a cane or a wheelchair and you're calling them a faker. You've got it completely backwards. The person was faking on the day that they were having a little bit of a better day, so they were able to seem normal, to pass for well, So that's the faking that's happening there. Get it straight. So, society, please support us. I'm here to talk about these issues. It's hard for me because things don't always come out right. I've been through a lot medically, physically, and I'm autistic, so I'll have to do annotations. I'll have to edit my videos a bit just so that they're cleaner and they flow better. But I really want to speak out, and I'm writing my book right now, and I will continue to write it. I'm in the second chapter right now. I put the prologue up, but I used text-to-speech program that was a bit tacky. So if someone wants to volunteer to read it, that'd be great, and I'll do it again. But you can either listen to that or read it on Blogger. I'm just going to take this day by day. I haven't been well lately, and I'm going to be making videos as much as I'm able to, and as the words come to me, I will be back.